Coming up on the Civil Discourse, controversial Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner discusses the challenges of his position and his mission to change the way prosecutors think about crime in his city.
So I think part of the legacy here is people understand this is a movement. This is not about an individual. This is truly a movement. These ideas are not brand new. They're just good old ideas that haven't been used. So long as you have people who understand the value of ending mass incarceration and viewing these things as public health crises, the whole system will simply work better.
Hello and welcome to the Civil Discourse. I'm your host, Paula Marantz Cohen, speaking to you from the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, where my guest is Philadelphia DA Larry Krasner. Mr. Krasner was elected to this office in 2017, where he mobilized a wide coalition of progressives to support his candidacy. His tenure has been controversial. I'm pleased to be able to speak to him about the challenges of his position and his general philosophy about criminal justice reform. Larry Krasner, welcome to the Civil Discourse.
Well, thank you for having me. Please call me Larry.
I will. So I'd like to begin by talking about your formative influences, what it is about your family, perhaps the talk at your family dinner table, that got you started thinking in the ways that you do about social justice. Can you bring us back to that time?
Sure. So my dad was an author and a writer, and his primary type of work when he was writing novels was crime. It was crime suspense. And I was always interested in crime, I guess just the same way that he was. It was a time when I was a kid when Walter Cronkite was on every night and everybody watched the same news. It wasn't the kind of fractured media we have now. So I remember following with great interest these terrifying stories about serial killers. There were a lot of bank robberies that were happening at that time. Many of these things have changed with information and video and so on. But I remember all of that. My mother actually was very religious, and she had been a tent evangelist. So she came from a position of great principle, as he did, although different kind of principle. And I suppose that probably had something to do with my interest in social justice reform.
Interesting. So fictional crime, true crime, and then religion. It's an interesting combination. So you went to college. You were obviously an achiever. You went to the University of Chicago, one of the most rigorous universities in the country, and then on to Stanford Law School, where you served on the Law Review. Now, this is an extremely, I guess you would say, elite and privileged education that you had, and I assume that many of your peers in law school went on to practice corporate law or some such thing. What motivated you to become a progressive lawyer?
Well, I was a public school kid. Even though my parents were very cultured and educated, we didn't grow up with a lot of money. And I think it was just always part of me to be really interested in things like the Vietnam War, the impeachment of Richard Nixon, the connection between poverty and crime, the unfairness that I perceived in the economy, even when I was there. So that was always part of it. I did take a year off in between college and law school when I basically worked as a carpenter. And during that year, I ended up being selected to a death penalty jury case. I was actually on the jury in a death penalty case. It was a very high publicity case in Chester County, Pennsylvania, outside of Philly. Terrible crime. And it was a sequester jury, meaning they stuck us all in a hotel together so that we wouldn't be influenced in any way, which is very, very uncommon. That was kind of a formative experience, formative moment for me. Whatever questions I had at that point about what I wanted to do with my life very much went in the direction of being a lawyer and doing criminal justice work.
Was the person found guilty?
Yes.
And were you at ease with that judgment?
Yes.
So that's interesting. And yet you feel that the mechanisms that you saw in operation there were very compelling. Did you see areas that you already felt needed to be reformed, or was it just that you felt you wanted to be part of the process?
I found the entire experience compelling. It was a situation in which one of the jurors had severe mental illness, which only came out due to the sequestration. What actually happened is he lied about needing psychotropic medication. And so after being separated from his home and his medication for several days, he decompensated and was ultimately removed from the jury. But that was a little signal that not everybody picked for the jury is really ready for it. And then we had other people during jury deliberations who made comments that were racist. And that, again, was something that for me was a little caution flag about how this is in some ways a wonderful system, but it has its flaws.
And then when you went on to Stanford, did you find that some of the observations that you had were reinforced by your training, by your peers? What was your sense of that experience in that law school?
So, there were different levels to it. Our class was unusually oriented towards public interest law. My wife and I met there, and she actually did public interest law for many years before she became a judge in Philadelphia County. So we were in that set of public interest people, but it was only 10%. 10% is a lot in some of these law schools.
So Stanford was higher than most.
Stanford
Probably,
that year was higher than most. Certainly, you were spending a lot of time around people who were motivated differently than you were, but what you did do in law school is you figured out in the tax code how it's fixed. You figured out in certain aspects of the criminal code how the relationship between the police and civilians is skewed in ways it's not skewed in other countries. So you saw the good and you saw the bad, but you saw it almost the way a car mechanic sees the manual that shows you how to put together this car.
I get it. That's well put. Then when you finished law school, you came, I guess, to Philadelphia. You were offered a position in the DA's office initially, but you chose to become a public defender.
Not exactly. I was offered some DA positions, prosecutorial positions around the country, but I was offered a job with the Philadelphia Public Defender's Office, which at the time was nationally award-winning and had done some pretty great things.
Now, when people work as public defenders over time, they often become jaded, or so I've been told. Was that something you saw among your peers? Did it happen to any extent to you? Or if it didn't, why didn't it?
I think people who work in almost any intense job become jaded. And I don't really feel like in the 3 years I was a county public defender and the 2 years I was a federal defender, I became jaded about the notion of justice. I did become jaded about things like the sentencing guidelines, which seemed to me to have been concocted by fools, which is actually correct, just so we're all clear. And I could go into that too if you like to talk about it.
They were concocted by fools.
Concocted by fools.
No doubt in your mind about it.
No question. And I'll tell you why I say that before I go back to the other answer.
Okay.
The sentencing guidelines in Pennsylvania were not based on any criminology at all. They were based on the notion that whatever judges are doing in Carbon County and Lycoming County and Philadelphia should be averaged. And that's what everybody should do. Well, that is a recipe to drive up the sentences in big cities where they actually deal with serious crime. That's what it is. And since the largest part of the caseload is coming out of the big cities, the notion of averaging, which has no basis in the law that says we should all do the average thing, ended up forcing up the level of incarceration for no good reason. It would be different if all kinds of criminologists had studied this, that, and the other thing and said, this is why, this is wise. But that didn't happen, and that has never happened since with Pennsylvania's guidelines.
And so you saw these things that for whether or not you felt the people you were defending were guilty or not, you saw the system as being corrupt?
Yes, I mean, I defended a lot of guilty people, and I defended quite a few innocent people too. But I saw problems with the way judges got selected in Philadelphia. I saw problems with things like mandatory sentencing and sentencing guidelines. I saw all of that. People are not perfect. Their institutions are not perfect. And it did make me want to do something different.
Now, before you ran for DA, you had your own firm. Is that right? You went off on your own and did, civil rights law?
Civil rights and criminal defense. It was probably 80% criminal defense, about 20% civil rights. I had my own firm with a partner here and there, but for 25 years after 5 years of being a public defender.
So what precipitated this very unconventional move of running for DA when, as your critics often would say you never had prosecuted a case.
What precipitated it was literally being in court 4 to 5 days a week for 30 years and watching everything that was happening in court and frankly finding it unacceptable. I was 56 years of age. I was watching who the other candidates were going to be. I knew every single one of them at some level. And it was pretty clear to me that it was going to be a typical election in the sense that there'd be a little bit of sort of liberal progressive talk in the same way there had been liberal progressive talk from Seth Williams when he became DA, but it wasn't going to amount to anything. Seth Williams very quickly upon becoming DA went the opposite direction from the things that he had said. So, you know, I felt like I'd done a lot of justice for individuals, which I had, in handling 10,000 or more cases, but I didn't feel like I'd had any sweeping impact. I was very anti-mass incarceration, and yet my entire career, no matter what I did, mass incarceration in Pennsylvania was worse and worse by even American standards. I mean, Pennsylvania is truly an outlier, and Philadelphia has been truly an outlier in some of the bad things.
So you were 56?
Yep.
And did you consider yourself a political person at that point? I mean, obviously you had strong feelings, and I'm sure you were vocal about what you saw, but I mean, this was a hugely political act to do this at that point in your life.
Right.
I'm wondering about how you felt.
I felt a couple things. My wife became a judge by running for office. She was an incredibly unlikely person to win because she had no contacts in Philly. She was not from Philadelphia. She had not done the bidding of either party as the party expected you to do 20 years ago, meaning favor after favor after favor. I was able to learn a lot more about how politics in Philly work, and I became her field manager, meaning that I was responsible for the get out the vote effort. And even though it took her 2 times to win, she really almost won the first time. It was only with great effort that the party shut her down. And that, I think, is when I realized the weakness, the reality that a lot of the power that is portrayed is hollow, and that there are a dozen ways that people who are outsiders to the system can actually win, and they can win without having, you know, the usual tanks and guns that you would think they need.
So her campaigns were your training, so to speak.
Yes, it was my education, and then it was my training. And then we're taking advice on which sections of the city might be most open to, you know, what she stood for, which is really not very much different than what I've stood for too.
So how was it different when you needed to build your coalition? I mean, obviously you were building on a lot of the things you had learned in helping elect her. What was different? What was more challenging? What was frightening or, you know, really threw you in the process of putting your coalition together?
Well, the magnitude of the undertaking is just so much greater. When you have someone running for judge in Philadelphia, there's always going to be 8 or 10 or 4 or 20 elected at any given time, depending on the number of openings. So you're not competing for a single spot, which is different. And a lot of what you're doing is really about election day. It's about lining up support within the party from wards, but then it's about election day. When you're running for DA, it's not that different than running for mayor. You have things going on 3 months before the election, 2 months before the election. You have campaigns of people doing mass texting. You have campaigns of people who are, you know, you have unions that are putting door hangers on people's doors. And, you know, it really was daunting. You were up against, one of the other candidates put $1.2 million of his own money into the campaign. And so you're having to raise funds, and you're hoping that all of this will come out the right way. I think we must have gone to 50 or 60 different forums, but in its own weird way, it was joyous, so it was all right.
It must have been exhilarating. Now, what do you say to the critics who say, and I guess because they cannot imagine that it could be done, that George Soros, the progressive billionaire, who is a major contributor to your campaign, bought your election?
So this is something a lot of people understand. George Soros did not actually contribute $1 to my campaign.
Really?
Not a dime. There is no doubt that George Soros's PACs put a bunch of money into supporting my campaign, but it's actually a totally different phenomenon. What happens after Citizens United, the U.S. Supreme Court case, is that they essentially said, look, if George Soros hates you, he can put as many millions as he wants of his own money into hating you. And if he likes you, he can put as many millions as he wants into liking you. but he can't talk to you. And he can't do commercials with you, and he can't in any way coordinate with your campaign, at least in Pennsylvania, right? So what happened there is I did not know if this would occur. I never met nor knew much about George Soros. When advertisements that were television and mailings and radio started to happen, I had no idea that they were coming. In fact, all my neighbors got mailings that weren't sent to me because whoever was doing this was making sure that no one could claim falsely that there had been any kind of coordination.
Yet it did help you enormously.
It did help, and I think it's fair to say it helped enormously in this sense. At the time, that they started spending money 3 weeks before the election, 21 days. And at the time, the polling that I was aware of showed that we were either in first or more or less tied for first with another person. I think the significance it had, and it did have significance, is that it took a message that was resonating with people, something that had gotten us pretty far, and it amplified it.
So at this point, I'd like you to just quickly run down your platform and then also connect it to what you think or other DAs in the country who share your view, who have been successful, and whether you think that this is a trend, a sea change that's occurring in this country.
So platform was to end mass incarceration, or do whatever we could for that purpose, to end mass supervision, which is probation and parole. It's just another funnel back into mass incarceration. And too much of it actually makes people more likely to commit crimes. It was to protect immigrants so you don't have a natural group of targets who can be targeted for crime. It was to take the money that you are saving on the immense expense of mass incarceration, put it into public schools, put it into drug treatment, put it into psychological treatment, put it into things that are going to prevent crime, which is what is done in most places around the world. I mean, there's a number of European countries where they have about 1/9 or 1/10 as many people in jail, and they have about 1/9 or 1/10 the level of crime.
So what are the other, who are your peers across the country? Who do you talk to who are trying or doing the same thing?
There's probably about 30 of them, honestly. But
are there key people that are your go-to people?
Yeah, I mean, there are people I talk to regularly. There are people whose campaigns I've supported, and there's no question it's a trend. There are other people who are not quite as progressive, but still within the fold.
I mean, the idea that there is this change occurring in the country is something that gives us pause and makes us think that maybe there is a structural change underway in our justice system and in other areas as well. I want to ask you about the controversial fact that when you entered this office, you fired 31 employees. That was all over the news. Why did you, as some people have said, why didn't you give them a chance? Why did you clean house?
So this is an office of 600 people. It's an office of 300 attorneys. Of the 31 people who were separated, about 29 or 30 of them were attorneys. People have to remember that I was an attorney in this system for 30 years.
So you knew these attorneys?
I had been interviewing some of these attorneys in the sense that when I was a powerless person in this system, I was handling cases with them. I was aware of their reputations with judges and with other defense attorneys and with other prosecutors. I knew a lot about them. I'd read appellate cases about what they did and shouldn't have done in certain cases. So, and I don't want to mischaracterize. Some of them were actually ethical professionals whose philosophy was just so dead set against us that I knew that they couldn't help but undermine us steadily in the office. Others had, frankly, serious ethical issues and had done things that my office would never accept. I have to tell you, though, I actually was surprised at the reaction because, even Ed Rendell, who was district attorney in Philadelphia before he went on to all those other political things, Ed Rendell came out in the paper and said, I fired 25% of the office when I became DA, which he did, apparently, after he made every single person in the office submit their resignation and then re-interview, he fired 25%. Well, the percent that I was firing was 5%. And it was
very interesting. Interesting double standard there.
Right.
What about your relationship with the police? Could you talk to us a little? This comes up again and again.
Right.
We now have a new police commissioner. I don't know if this will make for a difference or not, but a DA with your particular ideas, maybe is bound to butt heads with the police. Do you feel that that's inevitable and that sort of tension is par for the course, or do you think in time this will be resolved?
Well, first of all, let's understand I was endorsed by the African American Officers Association, okay? I was not endorsed by the Trump-endorsing, Trump-loving Philadelphia Fraternal Orders of Police, which has been a very conservative Republican, 100% white-led organization for decades. I shouldn't be. I actually said that I would not accept their endorsement because what the FOP has stood for all of these decades, frankly, is that police should never be accountable. I don't believe that. I think everybody should be accountable. Corruption is not okay. Police are there to serve and to protect, and their integrity is really important. So I was heartened to see the African American Officers Association, who have to deal with some of the problems in Philadelphia police culture, endorsed me. And I was not surprised that the FOP did not endorse. But everybody needs to remember, they're not actually the police department. The police union has no control over what the police do on a daily basis. That control is in the police commissioner. And the commissioner here, when I came in, was Richard Ross. Richard Ross and I had each other's cell numbers. We talked, anywhere from 1 to 4 times a week, usually briefly about matters of concern. I can say we never had a fight. We agreed about 85, 90% of the time. The other 10% or so, we were candid in our disagreement. I thought I had quite a good relationship with Richard Ross. And our new commissioner is someone who I actually knew before the selection process started. She's considered by some people to be on the list of progressive police chiefs. And that's how I came to know her, at an event for progressive DAs and for progressive police chiefs. So I'm optimistic.
So the issue of your not prosecuting homelessness, certain drug-related crimes and so forth, enervates them and some community members who find people on their doorsteps and so forth. What do you say to that? This quality of life issue that people feel, police feel, has deteriorated since you've become DA?
I mean, let us understand, homelessness is not a crime. You cannot prosecute someone for being homeless. But yes, I've been to meetings in Old City, and I've been to meetings in Center City where there's a steady drumbeat of why do the police allow homeless people to sit on park benches? Well, because it's their constitutional right, because our system says that's okay. And just because you're affluent people in a particular neighborhood, you don't get to say poor people leave, right? On the front involving drugs, the only drug that we're not prosecuting at this level is marijuana. And I'm talking about marijuana possession. We still prosecute marijuana sales. So it's a fiction that we don't prosecute drugs. It is true, though, that we are going in the direction of pushing all the mere possession cases. And by mere possession, I mean they're not selling, they're not possessing amounts that indicate they could be selling. The mere possession cases, we're trying to push all in the direction of diversion. There's a politics to some of what is being said by some police officers. And I have a lot of very good friends who are police officers and who give me important information. But part of the politics is some of them are losing overtime. They used to make a lot of money prosecuting 6,000 kids in Philly for possessing weed, much to the chagrin of their parents, by the way. And those kids were overwhelmingly black. Well, they're not making that money anymore because they're not coming to court to testify.
Well, this also connects to your support of injection sites, which I don't know where we are with that in terms of it's being approved or not. You are in favor, and do you think it will be approved? Why are you in favor? Do you think it will solve some problems in our city?
So I have been to supervised injection sites, or as I call them, harm reduction centers in Vancouver, Canada, in Germany, and in Portugal. And I've seen them in places where they have been for a very long time. People do not understand what these places are. They're basically, most of them look like hair salons, where you walk in, and what they actually do is they just make sure that if you're taking opioids, you don't stop breathing. They nudge you to wake you up when you start to nod off, because that's what opioids do. They suppress your breathing. And then if that doesn't work, they nudge you a little more, rub your sternum. If that doesn't work, they get out the oxygen tank and give you oxygen to wake you up. And only if all of that doesn't work do they do what any decent Good Samaritan would do, which is call an ambulance or give you naloxone to wake you back up. Nobody is injecting drugs for them. That's not what happens in these places. Nobody is giving them drugs.
Giving them clean needles, though.
They are given clean needles, which is something that
People just can't some people can't wrap their minds around that. I agree with you on this point.
No, I understand.
But I also understand the other side as well.
Well,
We're almost out of time. I want to
Okay.
ask you one last question, which is what you see as your legacy, and if there's something that you would want to accomplish before you leave office that would add to that legacy.
So I think part of the legacy here is people understand this is a movement. This is not about an individual. This is truly a movement. These ideas are not brand new. They're just good old ideas that haven't been used. And that's why whenever I'm gone to my beach chair, it doesn't really matter. So long as you have people who understand the value of ending mass incarceration and viewing these things as public health crises, the whole system will simply work better.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you, Larry Krasner, for talking with us today.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and thank you for joining us today on the Civil Discourse.